Hi, everyone. We'll just wait one more minute to get started. Thank you for being here today. Sorry, everyone. Good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining. The beauty of technology was still talking on mute. I want to welcome everyone today. We're super excited to have you all join us for this very special Congressional National Foster Care Month briefing. I am going to go ahead and introduce Amy from Senator Stabenow's office, who's going to kick us off.
Thanks, Taylor. Hi. Thanks, everybody. On behalf of the Senate Caucus on Foster Youth, we're super excited to hear from our panelists today and just wanted to welcome you all to the briefing and thank you for joining. And thanks to everybody who agreed to speak today and who helped organize this. So I'll shoot it back over to Taylor and we can get started hearing from our great panelists.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Amy. I am now going to introduce our moderators for today. First, Tony Parsons from Youth Villages. Hey, Tony, and Scout Hartley from the National Foster Youth Institute. And I'm going to turn it over to them to introduce us and kick us off.
Thank you for that, Taylor. Before we get started, everybody, I just want to take a moment of silence to honor those lives lost yesterday evening in Uvalde, Texas. Let's just take a moment and reflect. Thank you for sharing that silence with us. Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Tony Parsons, and I have the pleasure of serving as the Federal Policy Specialist for Youth Villages, a leader in children's mental health and behavioral health. And we help children, youth, and families involved in the child welfare, the juvenile justice, and the mental health care systems in 23 states and the District of Columbia. We have the pleasure of being one of the largest providers of foster care in our home state of Tennessee. And through our LifeSet program, we offer a bridge from foster care into successful adulthood for more than 5,500 young people last year alone. It is an honor to be here today in partnership with fantastic youth-serving organizations like Think of Us, Foster Club, the National Foster Youth Institute, the Congressional Coalition on Adoption Institute, and Journeys to Success campaign. And we're also here in collaboration with the Senate Caucus on Foster Youth, the Congressional Caucus on Foster Youth, and the Congressional Coalition on Adoption. I also show up today in a dual role because I have lived child welfare experience myself. And I can think of no better way to celebrate National Foster Care Month than to be here with you, with my co-moderator, Scott Hartley, and some amazing lived experts. Congress has made it abundantly clear since the pandemic, they want to partner with those with lived experience to create the policy solutions that'll move us forward. We have come together today to build on that progress that we've made, to continue to ensure that all youth in the foster care system have the outcomes they deserve. And we have such a unique opportunity today with the 117th Congress to do just that. There are so many levers available to us, and now we're figuring out which ones do we pull. Together, we stand in support of a bipartisan mental health package, an increase in reauthorization of Title IV-B, and additional legislative changes to support transition age and older foster youth. And we all look forward to working with Congress to advancing these child welfare and mental health priorities that every young person has been lifting up. Today, you're going to hear about some potential opportunities to go on a path forward. Our panelists are going to touch on issues that are currently before Congress and so many others. I encourage everyone to listen closely and engage us in the chat because there will be time for open Q&A near the end of today's briefing. But that's enough for me for now. I want to hand things over to my good friend and dear colleague, Scout Hartley, the Senior Policy Manager for the National Foster Youth Institute, to add any context he'd like, introduce our panelists, and to get us started this afternoon. Scout, take it away, my friend.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that Tony really excellently set this event up, and just in terms of setting up the policy stakes and the importance of hearing from the voices of those who have lived experience to truly inform and meaningfully inform policy solutions. So I actually just want to briefly share some of my awe and my appreciation for being a part of this event today. So in a real way, this panel brings together the lived experience and the lived expertise of 6 leaders in advocacy. This event has been planned for and by organizations that serve young people in change-making and powerful ways. It's a core part of all the work that we do, separately and together, which is to integrate the voices and expertise of young people in various ways. Throughout our programming, our staffing, and our organizing, we carry with us the shared wisdom of foster youth and alumni community. And of course, with this being National Foster Care Month, like Tony said, this is no better way to really honor the month than by having such a special and substantive event, again, organized by and for the community of young leaders, and for such an important audience as these invaluable caucuses and congressional leaders. So I do want to personally thank the Senate Foster Youth Caucus, the Congressional Caucus on Foster Youth, the Congressional Coalition on Adoption, and all other congressional leaders for holding a space to hear from these leaders. They offer a unique and unmatched lens into the experiences, the challenges, and the opportunities that foster youth need or sometimes don't receive, as well as a clear-eyed perspective about what it takes to improve the state of child welfare throughout the country, and also why that's critically important for everyone, not just this community alone. So with that, I just want to introduce our wonderful panel today. First, we're going to be hearing from Lucero Noyola, who's a special advisor to the Journeys to Success campaign. Next, we're going to be hearing from Haley Dalia, who's a policy and advocacy fellow at the Center for Adoption Support and Education. Following her will be Megan Soul, who's representing the panel for Think of Us. Also, Natalie Clark will be next. She's a lived experience leader with Foster Club. And then Joseph Mariscal, who's a lead intern with the National Foster Youth Institute, as well as a foster care advocate more broadly in Los Angeles. And our final speaker, of course, last but not least in any way, Alexander Galindo, who's a member of the Youth Advisory Council for Youth Villages. So with that, I want to thank all the panelists for sharing their expertise today. Thank you all for holding space. And give it back to our, just right over to, I think, our first speaker, Lucero.
Well, thank you, Scout. Can y'all hear me? Thumbs up? Okay. So thanks everyone for having me on today. My name is Lucero Noyola, and I am coming to you all from California. I have lived experience in the juvenile justice system and the foster care system in Los Angeles. And like Scout said, I serve as a special advisor to the Journey to Success campaign, which is so happy to partner with everyone here today to put this briefing on. So I believe I will introduce Haley, but just to share a little bit about Journey to Success, it's a policy campaign that seeks to improve opportunities and outcomes for all youth and young adults who experience foster care. And we believe that we could do this by working together across parties. And if you want to learn more, you can check out the website journeytosuccess.org. I will pass it on to Haley, and I'll be speaking to you all later about economic security, which is one of the topics that I'm very passionate about. And is one of the things that Journey to Success does have as a priority within its framework. So here is Haley.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Thank you for joining today's briefing. My name is Haley Dalia. I graduated from Rowan University in 2021 with a bachelor's in sociology and mathematics. I also served as a 2020 and 2021 Congressional Coalition on Adoption Institute foster youth intern, and I presently serve as the Policy and Advocacy Fellow at the Center for Adoption Support and Education. a national leader in mental health services for the foster, adoptive, and kinship community. A few months before I was set to age out of foster care, I began searching for therapists who were covered by Medicaid. In my state of New Jersey, youth are given a list and told to figure out the rest themselves. Services were very limited, as the two options were either therapy in a large group setting, or I could call up the first of the month to possibly reserve a session. These locations and hours of services also required me to take off from school or work. The breadth of necessary and flexible mental health resources is not covered through Medicaid. The system gives youth an impossible ultimatum to either earn an education and work to pay their bills or seek healing. Current law poses barriers to do all of this at once. In fact, in the state of New Jersey, the Medicaid extension for young adults, MAIA, for foster youth covers virtually no mental health services because when MAIA was signed into law in 2013, the old Medicaid policy from that time was grandfathered in. So in order for a young person aging out of the system to access mental health services, they would have to sign themselves out of MAIA to enroll in regular Medicaid, which is still largely inadequate for providing trauma-informed, adoption-competent mental health services. Further, most youth do not know that this is an option. I didn't know it was an option until I was signing myself out of MAIA to enroll in my employee health insurance. Overall, there are a lack of providers that accept Medicaid because reimbursement rates are so low. My story is not unique. Children and youth in foster care experience significant trauma before, during, and after their experience in care. More than 80% of foster youth have mental health issues, including post-traumatic stress disorder, depression, social phobia, panic disorder, and anxiety, among others. They also face a unique type of trauma called ambiguous loss as a result of being physically separated from their biological families, communities, resource providers, and schools. There's no shared vocabulary for recognizing ambiguous loss within the child welfare system, because it is simply accepted as a natural consequence of foster care. Unresolved loss and grief must be addressed in order to heal. As a nation, we have the responsibility to help youth who have experienced care so they can live full and meaningful lives. Youth in foster care deserve and are worthy of healing, but we have to make mental health services accessible, flexible, and equip our child welfare and mental health workers with the training and required assessments needed to help youth not only survive, but thrive. Thank you, and I will turn it over to Megan.
Hello, my name is Megan Saul from Delaware. Today I'm representing Think of Us from the standpoint of lived experience and professional experience. The first time I entered the foster care system was on my 4th birthday, and I spent approximately 13 years in and out of the system. I also graduated from Delaware State University with my master's degree in social work in 2018. I have experience professionally in mental health, substance abuse, and child welfare. I also am a stay-at-home mom for the time being and a first-time mom, and I'm also a leader in my community for advocating for child welfare issues. Some of the things that I'm passionate about that I would like to speak on today include focusing on obtainability and sustainability for both youth who have experienced foster care and are transitioning into adulthood, as well as for case managers who are a fundamental piece of the system. More specifically, I would like to discuss tuition waivers for those who have experienced care so that they don't have to focus or choose between obtaining a degree or having a sustainable career, as well as obtaining quality case managers by increasing their pay and building a better workforce for the child welfare system. This would increase the number of case managers and would create sustainability by reducing caseloads and increasing the quality of case management provided, and also reduce burnout and increase retention of quality workers. Creating opportunities for these youth to obtain a livable wage and a sustainable career is not just cost effective, it's absolutely necessary. And finally, child welfare case managers are historically underpaid and overworked. The very people who are responsible for the safety and welfare for the kids in our country in foster care are experiencing burnout, and they're leaving for better jobs. It's the duty of our country to provide quality services to our most vulnerable population. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak here today. I just wanted to reflect a little bit on my professional and my lived experience and what I'm passionate about from each. Coming from a social work perspective and also working in the child welfare sector, I have these unique perspectives in how we can improve our services for our youth in our country and provide better outcomes for youth transitioning into adulthood. So thank you again, and I'll pass it along.
Hi, y'all. Thanks so much for being here and having me. My name is Natalie Clark. I use she, her pronouns. I am 23 years old and I'm from Salt Lake City, Utah. I spent 6 years in the foster care system, both as a young child and as a teen entering into adulthood. I experienced placements including foster care, proctor care, group homes, congregate care, substance abuse rehabilitation programs, shelters, and juvenile detention. I've been a lived experience leader, a part of Foster Club's national network for foster youth since 2020. I earned my bachelor's degree in social work last year despite multiple instances of homelessness, housing, and financial insecurity. I was able to persevere, and I know many of my peers don't have these resources and supports necessary in order to get where I am, and I have the privilege to be today. So I have been working for my state child welfare agency as the lived experience youth coordinator for almost a full year now. In my role, I connect youth to resources, bring youth together across the state for youth advisory boards, and I advocate for youth voice at all levels. Even now, as an accomplished young person, I'm always still trying to ensure that I have the necessary resources and supports that I need, just as others mentioned, not just to survive, but also thrive. So I would like to focus mainly on housing and placement stability and understanding the real experience that we go through, not just while in care, but once we leave care. And I will go ahead and pass it on to my fellow colleague, Joseph.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Joseph Mariscal. I was born and raised in East Los Angeles. I entered the foster care system for the first time when I was 13. Then I fully entered when I was 15. I went into camp in Lancaster called Jarvis, then Boys Republic, which are both congregated care facilities. Bouncing around the system, living with mom and dad. Then finally I reached Eggleston Youth Center, which was a 6-bed group home. And after I reunified with mom close to 18. I graduated high school in time, even through all my trials and tribulations. I started college after high school, which at the moment I'm in the middle of transferring to Cal State University of Los Angeles. My major is urban planning. A little bit about my professional history. I began working at the Department of Family Services Glendora office as a youth worker at 18. Then later I started working at Eggleston Youth Center, group homes as a peer partner around 19, the group home which I was a youth at. Moving forward to today, I work at NFYI as an organizing intern. It is very important for former foster youth to be involved in these roles to better support the system. We need to increase the workforce because it will address the homeless.
I think we just lost Joseph's connection. So we're going to wait for him to come back on and turn it over to Alex to share a little bit more and introduce himself. Alex?
Hi, everyone. I just wanted to echo the same sentiments that have been expressed earlier and just saying thank you all to participating in this event and getting to hear all of our lived experiences and really just it means a lot knowing that we get to reach the eyes and ears of the movers and shakers in this country. I'm Alex Galindo. I'm from Knoxville, Tennessee, and I'm 22 years old. I entered foster care pretty late into my life when I was 17, and I'll get to why that was in a bit. But what I really want to talk today with you all about is the intersectionality of immigration as it relates to youth entering foster care, as well as discussing the education opportunities and the sometimes confusing path that foster kids have to navigate to achieve, finding a successful education. Like I said, I entered foster care when I was really late, like into my childhood. I entered at 17. which is pretty atypical. A lot of people enter a lot younger than that. But I entered because of immigration issues with my father, which eventually, kind of created a cascade of events that my mother wasn't able to cope with, and it wound me and my siblings in foster care. Um, Foster care and immigration isn't something that's super well tracked. Recently, I think there's been legislation to kind of help track and really start to look at those numbers and see what they are. Um, a research paper compiled in 2011, which is a little outdated, but it's the best that I could find. It estimated that there were at least 5,100 children at the time who were in foster care because of detained or deported parents. And at the time, they estimated in the following 5 years that that number would shoot up to around 20,000. I'm not sure what that number is currently, but I know that there are quite a few youth like myself who have parents who are unable to do a myriad of things, whether it's represent themselves in immigration court, um, or not immigration court, in juvenile court to maintain custodial rights, um, as well as a lot of other things that I hope I get to talk to you about. But I think Joseph has his connection back, and I think we'll turn it over to him. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. Pretty much I'll continue where I left off. Um, Working with NFI and advocacy, I see the positivity and change we help in the world. If that's through workshops, town halls, convenings, panels, all these great, well-orchestrated events not only bring youth and former foster youth together in a positive grassroots way, but it helps people outside looking in, like Congress members, politicians, and people working in this field better understand what's really going on ground zero. To help better understand our young leaders and their background to make a better system for everyone involved in every aspect, but to also involve our deprived community who has unlimited potential but limited resources. Involving youth in organizations like NFYI, CYC, OYC, and the other partners on this panel show how these resources and programs not only bring us together as one with universal purpose, helping our community, but not only helping us grow but succeed in many aspects in our daily life. As someone who is a service provider, this means a lot to me. As a professional, it helps me understand where everyone is coming from with laws, policies, and mentalities, but also as a former youth, I understand these needs. I understand the needs that youth need and deserve to succeed. With a person like me with such a diverse background, which there are many like me within the foster care system, but I am not one in a million or an exception. I was just one in a million outcomes that happen when the resources are easily accessible.
Thanks to each of you for sharing about yourselves a little bit, and also kind of forecasting what it like the special vision that you all have for the change and the priorities that you all bring to this panel today. With that, I was just curious, actually, if we could dig into a few questions to each of you on some specific topics. The first I was curious about is regarding the topic of mental health. And Haley, I'd like to ask you this question actually to start. I heard what you said, and I was just curious, what are some of the things that you'd like to see Congress include in a mental health care package? What are some of the supports that you would think would improve the state of mental health care for young people in the system?
Yeah, thanks so much, Scout. So I think a few things would be sort of addressing MAIA, so the Medicaid extension / Medicaid sort of loopholes that states sort of go through and their low reimbursement rates. I know the Senate Finance Committee has done, particularly Senator Wyden has tried to push mental health parity, but also the need for training the workforce. So social workers, their supervisors, mental health clinicians, the legal community, anyone that works in or alongside child welfare should be trained in ambiguous loss, unresolved grief, and trauma, which is specifically addressed in the National Adoption Competency Mental Health Training Initiative, which is a free web-based training designed in collaboration with the Children's Bureau. So mandating that the workforce take NTI. And if foster youth are receiving mental health services, they deserve the gold standard of care. However, they often receive services from the least trained professionals that do not understand the specific needs of the foster care community and the tremendous unresolved grief and loss that they are experiencing. And this is often the demographic, unfortunately, of providers that accept Medicaid. And so directed services must be adoption competent, and these services are meant to serve anyone that has been separated from their birth families. I know the whole adoption things in the language throws things off. But yeah, I know Senator Blunt has introduced legislation through the Timely Mental Health for Foster Youth Act, creating an additional mental health screening before youth age out of foster care and requiring caseworkers to help youth set up aftercare, therapeutic aftercare services as their transitional living plan. And then also more sort of qualitative research in regards to the National Youth and Transition Database, NITED. Currently, there aren't really questions on well-being. The only one that's slightly related is check yes or no if you have one caring adult in your life. But that doesn't really measure what's actually going on in these young people's lives. Do you have a person to call when you get a flat tire, when your car gets towed, when you need help in the middle of the night? And so we really need more qualitative measures to measure the well-being of young people who are aging out of the system. Thank you.
Oh, please, thank you. That was a really substantive and comprehensive answer. And I think, again, I appreciate the examples that you laid out too, those legislative examples of kind of some of the things that have been a priority for Congress that are always worth kind of keeping energy on and keeping the discussion around. So I appreciate that. So with that, I actually want to ask the same question to another one of our panelists here, Natalie, if I may, actually. I'm curious for your perspective on the same question too. So just to summarize it again, just some of the things that you might like to see included in a mental health package from Congress.
Absolutely. So I think first and foremost would be a commitment to competent and the correct care, first and foremost. Peer support, support for permanency, and meaningfully engaged experience in all levels. And I'll tell you why this is so important to me. I was temporarily placed back with my mom on supervised reunification. Part of my treatment was regular drug tests. When I failed one drug test, the solution immediately became removal. Instead of expecting natural hiccups in our transition and recognizing that I was getting used to building a brand new relationship with my mom as a teenager, going to therapy, participating in day treatment, excelling in school, my mistake kind of seemed to be the only focus. Instead of figuring out how to support and strengthen my environment that I had just entered, I was just removed and placed into the most restrictive lockdown environment possible for 9 months. I was restricted from my familial relationships, removed from my community, and not supported in maintaining relationships or bonds with either of them. The treatment facility I was placed into was for young people recovering from substance abuse, experiencing trafficking, and homelessness. Coming into this environment in 9th grade, an admittedly impressionable age, I began to question who I was, what I was supposed to do, and the path that I was supposed to follow. It took over a year to get to a place where my mom and I could live together, and all of a sudden that door was closed within a matter of weeks. The agency in court decided I wouldn't ever have that possibility again. What I know would have served me was an understanding that reunification meant building relationships. And in my case, that relationship was being built from the ground up, which takes time, has its ups and downs. And me and my mom would both need specific support, including recognition of our strengths, not just our weaknesses, providing healthy peer supports, resources, and working my way up to any of those necessary restrictions rather than just starting out with them.
Yeah. Yeah, and I appreciate you sharing about that too. Thank you for that. And it really lends just this great lived example of a lot of the nuance that just goes into being involved in the system and receiving those kinds of services. So again, I really appreciate that, and that helps me understand too how we want to make sure we always frame these things and the importance that we want to keep at the forefront when we do our work. So I appreciate that. And with that, for our next question, we wanted to shift topics a little bit, and I actually wanted to see if Tony, my co-moderator, actually might be
Yeah.
Hey, Tony. Yeah.
Yeah, happy to. Sorry about that. I'm battling some allergies today, but I wanna talk now. I want to shift a little bit and talk about economic security. This was definitely brought up by a couple of our panelists, and so I want to start with Lucero, if I can. Lucero, when you hear economic security, what does that mean to you, and what can that mean for the child welfare system to really build towards economic security?
Yeah, thanks, Tony, for asking me that question. Like I shared earlier, economic security is something that I'm passionate about. And what it really means for me is being in a place where you're able to weather life's challenges without being thrown into homelessness or poverty. I mean, it's having savings, it's being able to invest in ourselves, our goals, our dreams, and it's being able to really engage in our economy, like spend money on things that bring us joy and provide us new experiences and memories with the people that we love. And we can't really reach stability, let alone security, without education and work. And I think we're also not able to maintain focus on education and work without safe, affordable housing and other basic needs. So I think that for me, what really was transformational in my life and my daughter's life was when we accessed permanent affordable housing. And I think that if young people can access this sooner rather than later, it would be instrumental in terms of helping them as a foundation to really thrive on, and start pursuing what it is that they want to reach in their life. I know for me, I did access interim housing, and that was cool. It was, and it was helpful, but it also was only for a maximum of 2 years, and I ended up graduating out of the program my senior year of my undergrad. And so I just feel that for me, permanent affordable housing was more consistent and gave me that stability that I needed. And also, while I was in school and I was able to access housing, I think a big part of that journey was educational supports. And that's important. I think that we have to recognize that foster youth have non-traditional pathways to education. A lot of us got to work, got other responsibilities to take care of before we are in a place to focus on school. And if we have age limits on financial aid available to us, we're leaving money on the table, and we should be able to access dollars that are out there for us when we need them.
Definitely. Yeah, no, I appreciate it. I mean, I think you really covered a whole host of different pieces, really, if you will, that kind of fold into the economic security pieces.
Yeah.
So I appreciate that. I also want to bring May into this conversation, or Megan rather, into this conversation. Again, sort of same idea. Like when you hear economic security, what does that mean for you? What should that look like in the child welfare space?
Well, Sarah made so many great points, and mainly focused around the basic needs being met. Because me personally, my goal was to get out of poverty. Most people, that's what we want. That's the goal. So in that time, it's like, what do you do? I was faced with a decision, and the way my choice was to go to school. But unfortunately, the thing is that when you're transitioning from foster care and not having family support and financial support from family that oftentimes other students are able to receive, whether their parents are the ones taking out the loans, or they have money saved or money coming in that they can pay for, where they can focus on school. Because if you want to go to school, you should be able to focus on that, especially as a young person, and focus on excelling. Economic security to me and getting out of poverty meant having good credit and the ability to obtain assets, earning a livable wage, which to me was getting a degree, and being able to even have savings, which really means being debt free or as close to debt free as possible. And for me in the child welfare system, I believe that economic security really comes down to how are we educating young people to be financially successful? Are we teaching them financial literacy, but also in terms of are we allowing them to be successful? How do we support young people in this vulnerable transition from going from relying on a system their entire lives and being told what they can eat, where they can go to school, what they can wear, whether it's a financial restriction or a restriction based on your placement. You grow up with these restrictions, and so now you're thrown out into the world with little to no support. So the question is, how do we do that for young people? And I really truly believe that tuition waivers and allowing young people to go to school and pursue an education in order to secure a livable wage is really beneficial, in addition to just teaching them financial literacy.
Definitely. I think, that education piece around so many, not just the formal education, as you mentioned, but like just education on financial literacy and so many other things. I think all of those things really have to work hand in hand, to get youth to a place of economic security, not just while they're in child welfare, but when they make that transition into adulthood. So yeah, I really appreciate your insights on that. I want to shift just a little bit now, although both of I think everyone's touched on education a little bit. I want to bring Alex into this conversation now. Alex, we've talked a lot about education, you and I, but I would love to know, what are some of the education supports that you had while pursuing higher education that worked well for you? But also, what are some that you wish you had that you didn't have? That was a lot of words of had. I hope that makes sense.
No, it makes sense. I think the things that helped me the most while I was going to make my college decisions were actually the amounts and the types of financial aid that I received. Some of it was, at a federal level, some of it was at a state level, and some of it was at, an institutional level. And ultimately, I ended up choosing to go to the University of Tennessee because, it met all of my needs in terms of like housing and financials. And like there were a lot of things that, as someone who's aging out of foster care, there's things that are really prevalent on your mind. And the University of Tennessee was able to help meet all those obstacles. So when I went to school, that was my full-time job. My full-time job was to, be a student and do the best I could. In terms of things that I wish I had, looking back now, I wish, I think I always wish that there's opportunities that I would have taken, things that I maybe would have tapped into at a university level. But I guess, painting with broader strokes, something that I would have really loved to have received is, especially during COVID, maybe just like someone to kind of like walk alongside me in terms of understanding all the resources that were there to help me through such a difficult time. Not even necessarily just financial, we talked about mental health, but also other things that relate to being a student, such as, like where you want to go with your career, what you want to do with your job. I think when I started school, I wanted to go into medical school originally. That was my goal. And, COVID really put a damper on those plans because I wasn't able to shadow or do anything like that. And so maybe having had like the opportunity to speak with someone about that, who, was knowledgeable about that, that I think would have helped a lot in terms of helping me, I guess, progress mentally in terms of what I wanted to do in the future. But ultimately, I think I was really well supported, and I think the system really served me well. I think there was a little bit of confusion that I had in terms of scholarships ending early just because of my age. I turned 22, before, I finished school. And in Tennessee, that just so happens to be the age where you're no longer eligible for certain benefits. In other states, that's not the case. I think some states go up to 26, if I'm not mistaken. But I think, I guess consistency and, not having to worry where my birthday falls, I think that's something that I would have really loved to not have to have in the back of my mind. But ultimately, I do think the system served me really well and supported me as I pursued my education.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you for that. I think you touched on a lot of very salient issues, especially with the whole age thing, right? And this lack of uniformity necessarily across the country on certain supports, right? I think there's a lot that we can do in that space. And I think you highlight a very salient point that not just you, but like young people in all different states are feeling, especially in the COVID piece too, right? We know that education was kind of thrown into a whirlwind as our entire lives were. So definitely thank you for highlighting those pieces as well. I also want to bring in Haley into this discussion and just talk a little bit about that too. You know, like what are some of the sports that worked well for you? What are some things that you wish you could have, you know, as you kind of look back on your education journey?
Yeah, so to preface this, I went to an in-state school that was, fairly reasonably priced. And so I thankfully had federal and state grants cover the cost of my tuition, like federal Pell Grant. And then I believe my state grant was called TAG. And I also had my state educational training vouchers, your ETVs through Chafee. Which in New Jersey, it's called New Jersey Foster Care Scholars or Umbrella. And that was $2,500 per semester, and that paid for my books, my supplies, my laptop, gas, parking pass, occasionally summer and winter courses if I had funding left over. However, that funding was not always guaranteed because my sophomore year, my scholarship ran out of funding at the end of the year because their exact wording was that they didn't anticipate as many people qualifying and applying for the state ETV. And I was like, what? And so later in my college journey, I actually got really good at applying to scholarships. And so one of them was the Insoro Foundation, and they provide gap funding scholarships to youth aging out of foster care. And they also provide a life skills program through the Orange Duffel Bag Initiative to every scholar. I had also received scholarships through the Asian American Pacific Islander Scholars and through my university's Student Government Association. I'm often praised for my academic achievement and success. However, all of this wouldn't have been possible without my community of folks that have believed in me, especially the adults and the mentors in my life. When I look back on my education experience, I realized that it wasn't the system or institutions like my school that helped me get to where I am today. It was my supportive network. And so I really wish that the state or my school did more to connect young people with foster care experience to caring, supportive adults and mentors. Looking back at my state ETV policies, I also felt that they were limiting because they were only available until your 23rd birthday. And if at any point you stopped going to school or took a semester off after 21, you were no longer eligible to receive support. And I don't think that's fair considering the additional challenges that foster youth face in pursuing higher education. And if my placement had disrupted at 20 or 21 rather than at 19, I could have easily been that person that wasn't eligible for services. I also wish I knew about all of the scholarship and funding opportunities available to me while I was still in high school. High school juniors and seniors are actually eligible for the most funding during this time. And so having someone tell students that and then also help them to apply to these and sitting down with them to review these applications, I think would be really helpful and open up a lot of doors for foster youth.
Definitely. Thank you for those perspectives from you and Alex. I think you touched on another piece that's super critical. The whole higher education piece is like having community-based supports there to support you too. That is something that we've seen just work tremendously well because it's so much more than just being able to pay for school, which is important. It's also having the support that you need to stay in school and complete it. And there's a lot of legislation out there that would address, application fees to, providing TA to schools that want to do more to support foster youth while they're on their campuses, and so many other ways that we can really move forward. So I thank you both for your perspectives on this piece. And I do want to hand things over to my friend Scout to take us to our next part.
Yeah. So, and thank you for all the just incredible perspective here. And I'm really excited for this next series of questions, this next question really about the topic of workforce. As someone who, I think it's kind of the thread that runs through a lot of what we talk about when we talk about community-based support and things like that. So I'm actually curious for actually Joseph, for your perspective on this question. And you spoke a little bit about this in your introduction, but really how you think it benefits the child welfare system when they hire people who have lived experience or even just a trauma-informed background in general? If you want to share a little.
I think it's really beneficial to the child welfare system all around when our young leaders are put in these roles around the system they come from, and is very beneficial for the youth themselves. Not only does it combat homelessness, as 50% of homeless people have been in some type of foster care. I'm not too sure where I would be without these internships and youth working programs that are in place for us. These resources have done so much for me personally, but also is more meaningful to us than it would be to someone without lived in care, because this is the system which we come from and we understand firsthand. It makes it more impactful dealing with current youth as we understand their problems and issues they may have. We have been faced with these adversities ourselves. So we are in a better way shaped to advise and guide these youth as we have been in their shoes firsthand. We better understand what works and what doesn't work when it comes to their needs, representations, and resources. And with the trauma enforced background, we are also used to dealing with people from so many different and diverse backgrounds naturally because of all the great, unique people we come across within care. We are more informed and understanding naturally when it comes from the different situations we get put in across regularly in care.
Yeah. And thank you for that. And I think what you're highlighting too is just like what, at least what I hear, is just the level of empathy that really just comes along with having that background and entering the field, as someone who can be a service provider to others. I'm similarly interested for Megan, for actually your perspective on this question too. I know you've mentioned some of this as well, and I think the audience can really gain a lot from your perspective. So yeah, just how it benefits child welfare when lived experience is employed.
For sure. And as you know, I am a social worker and I have lived experience. So I have been in that role. But first and foremost, even prior to working for the Division of Family Services, I was brought as an advocate in my community to help change things for the foster care system. And I got to say that honestly, it just creates leaders. We're used to being looked at as disposable. We sometimes suffer from abandonment issues, and when we're put into these roles and showing that not only is our experience, it's not something that we chose for to go through, but it is something that we can control and what we do with it and turn it into something positive. But we don't just know what it feels like, we know how the system works. Quality support and empathy for youth and care is also a really great aspect of this, and individuals who don't just look at it as a job. So for me, it's something I took personal. It was a passion. I feel like I may have not done my job better, but done it with more desire than some other individuals. So we also know that each youth in their experience is their own expert. So several benefits of doing so. Thank you, Scout.
Oh, please, thank you. I think that a really invaluable perspective. That aside from venues like this, really, we ought not we don't generally hear from that. So, lastly, then, in that case, just for Natalie too, because I know you also have a direct perspective and experience working in the field as well as having that background.
Absolutely. Well, I would just say hiring lived experience is valuable and benefits the child welfare system through supporting young people and their families to properly navigate the system as a whole in order to access those necessary resources and support systems that are available in order to keep them together, which is the goal of the child welfare system. Right. So, as a child welfare worker myself, I still find the system confusing to navigate every single day. And I even had to navigate it as a teen myself. So, if we focus on benefiting the youth and the families, then the child welfare system as a whole benefits both directly and indirectly. Young people with lived experience offer a unique lens to view the system through that comes specifically from that lived expertise, but not only living through the impacts of the system in the moment, but the future repercussions of our actions, our policies, and our procedures as well. So, like my statement earlier, my lived experience, I can articulate not only what happened and how, but also ways my case could have been handled more effectively, which is all of our goal, to share our own experience so that hopefully some of those mistakes that did happen don't happen for future youth. One of the things I hear the most throughout my career in child welfare already, working with people that have been in this field their entire lives, is how being around me completely changes their viewpoint and how they support their youth and how they can envision success and possibilities for youth in a whole new way. So investing in that peer support and creating incentives for hiring individuals with lived experience, and it will really just help move the field in the right direction. We need to have genuine support for youth and families, which means seeing us as strategic partners with ideas inspired directly from our own lived experience, listening to them, and acting on those recommendations that we have.
Yeah. Yeah. And that point about just setting things up for the future to make sure that these circumstances don't get repeated by generations. I mean, I think that that's really the synthesis that ties this all together. So I really think that that's great. And I know we just have a few minutes left, and I appreciate that. Thank you, Natalie. I just want to open it up quickly to say for the audience, if there's anyone who has a question that they'd like to hear get asked, just in the few minutes that we have left, I really encourage you all to drop something in the chat. I see that there's a lot of discussion just in response to the things that young people have shared. And I see some really great champions out there, and I just want to call out and thank each of you. But in the next few minutes that we have before we close out, I just wanted to open that up to you all. Maybe we have just another one question we can go through that we have prepared. In the meantime, while we're getting the audience prepped up, though. So if I could actually, I wanted to ask a question for Alex. So Alex, a question about something that you actually talked about a little bit too, for what we refer to in the community as crossover youth, when people are kind of dual involved or in the child welfare system or immigration or child welfare as well as juvenile justice. What are some of the challenges that are experienced by these young people, and how can we better support them?
Yeah, no, I really appreciate the question and I appreciate the opportunity to talk about it. So one thing as it relates to my story, not to get like too anecdotal, but some things that I realized while, witnessing my father's immigration case unfold and, the subsequent, proceedings in, juvenile court that me and my younger siblings went through. I realized that it's really difficult for, undocumented, immigrants to have representation in any kind of foster care proceedings or juvenile court proceedings, while they're currently like detained in immigration custody. And even once removed from country, my father wasn't deported, but he agreed to a willful departure. Um, and he still there was no collaboration between juvenile court and the consulate to preserve parental rights, basically as if, they acted as if, my father didn't, had no initiative to, advocate for himself on that platform. So that's something that's really difficult because, you have these parents who, love their children, but for, government or immigration reasons, they're not able to, be there and parent their child. Um, I think I've thought a lot about the issue in terms of um, I obviously wouldn't ever want to advocate for something which I hate the term, but it's used really commonly, like an anchor baby situation. Obviously, like that's something that realistically, like people want to avoid, and I do understand that. But I think, especially in my case, my father, he was removed from country. I still have siblings who are in foster care, haven't aged out. And he served his, what they call a time bar. So the time you have to wait till you're eligible to return to the country. And for a lot of reasons, youth being like in vulnerable situations isn't always considered in terms of reasons to expedite immigration. And that's something I'm not sure what the answer is if I'm being on a scout, but I think there's a lot of things that um, fall through the cracks. And I think there's a lot of kids who are, you know, feeling that, they've been, underserved by the country that they do call home. And it's a difficult issue. And I think there's a lot that could and will be done in the future about it. But I think the sooner we start the conversation, I think the sooner, those youth get to be with their parents.
Yeah, and I have to say I appreciate your honesty and just saying like, look, let's explain the problem and let's also say that maybe I don't have the answers myself, and this is not incumbent on you yourself to have the answers. It's incumbent on us to have a collective discussion and to work with the decision makers and make sure that there's a chorus of agreement around the need to change and what that might look like. So I really appreciate that, and and thank you all for that. So with that, we really just have like one other question in the last minute that we have. I wanted to also give an opportunity for my co-moderator Tony to close us out as well. So yeah. Hey, Tony.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks, Scout. We did get one question from the audience that I do want to lift up, and I think this is a really great way to kind of close out this briefing before we have our official message here. And this question comes from Shaquita Ogletree, who I have the pleasure of working with at Youth Villages. She says to our panelists, what piece of advice would you give to your brothers and sisters currently in the system or within the child welfare system? So if we could do this round robin style really quick, what is one piece of advice you'd give? Yeah, everyone will answer. What is one piece of advice you'd like to give to your siblings in care right now? And we will kick things off because the first person I can see is Haley, so you can start.
To find your people and lean on them when you can. This is a very hard system to get through, and you need community. So,
Natalie, you want to go next?
Oh my gosh, I don't know if y'all saw, but I can't snap louder for that. Find your community is so important. I found my community and it's sitting right here next to me, and I've never felt more loved and uplifted. And I would say my piece is start sharing your voice now. You have so many resources of support and young people that want to uplift your voice. Start using it. Find us. Let us know what you want to say, what you're going through, because you can be the change maker.
Lucero.
Super similar to Natalie. Just be willing to voice your thoughts, your feelings. Like, reach out. Because I know a lot of people can be shy and feel like nobody cares and stuff. Because the system really does treat you like that and give you that message. But like really be able to find the courage within yourself to still speak out. Because it's the only way you're going to get somewhere is really if you start taking care of yourself.
Joseph.
Just be resilient, be strong, never give up. Trial and tribulations are just that. They will pass. Also look for resources on the internet or through word of mouth. And also we're all great and pretty much we are made to succeed, and like never put yourself down. You just gotta continue on. The fight must continue.
Definitely. And Megan.
Wow, Joseph, I feel like you took the words out of my mouth. But seriously, never give up. I'm going to uplift that again because I would say, honestly, I know that it's hard. I know that it gets rough and you can feel like you're losing hope, but never give up. Always believe in yourself. Be optimistic and know that you are capable, that you're worthy, and that you can do and be whatever you want in this life. Even though we face barriers, you got this.
And Alex.
I think my biggest piece of advice would be to never sell yourself short. When opportunities come your way, don't, tell yourself that you're undeserving. Take every opportunity that comes your way and know that you've earned it. Life rarely gives you handouts, and I would have to agree with that. I don't think I've been given a lot of handouts. I think, I fought for a lot of the things that I have in my life, and I was bold enough to accept some of the opportunities, and there have been so many fruits that have came from that, and I would encourage anyone to do the same.
Awesome. And I do want to hand things over now to close us out for today. First of all, thank you so much for being here, everyone, and to our fantastic panelists for hanging out with us today, and to celebrate National Foster Care Month with all of you has been an absolute pleasure. And I do want to hand things over now to our dear friend and colleague, Angelique Salazan, the Policy Director for the Congressional Coalition on Adoption Institute, to take us home.
Thank you, Tony, and hello, everyone. Thank you all for being with us today to tune in and hear from our lovely panelists. My name is Angelique Salazan, and I serve as the Policy Director at the Congressional Coalition on Adoption Institute, the nonprofit that supports the Congressional Coalition on Adoption, otherwise known as the CCA. And I too have experienced the foster care system. In closing, we just appreciate your time and attention to hear about the experience of young adults who have experienced the foster care system. And we encourage you to continue to be engaged and welcome anyone who wants to be engaged on these issues. To everyone who pours into the system, thank you for your continued commitment to systemic improvement within the child welfare system. We also encourage you to engage with the organizations and caucuses who have made a commitment to improve the experience of youth and families who experience the foster care system. And lastly, thank you to all the partners who made this briefing today a reality. Foster Club, Think of Us, the National Foster Youth Institute, Youth Villages, and the Journey to Success campaign, and the immense support and leadership of the Senate Caucus on Foster Youth, the Congressional Foster Youth Caucus, and the Congressional Coalition on Adoption. Have a great day and take care, everyone.